A town can laugh at a woman for buying a hole in the ground, but it gets quieter when the road under their tires is made from her mistake. I had $1,375 left in my checking account. That money was supposed to buy oat hay before the first frost. It was supposed to keep my cows alive long enough for spring. It was supposed to buy me one more month of pretending the bank was not already measuring my farm for a coffin. Instead, I spent it on an abandoned gravel pit, 39 acres of broken stone, a dangerous drop behind a rusted gate, a dead cut in the earth everyone in Cedar Bluff called the Bone Pit. They laughed so hard under that auction tent, the canvas snapped in the wind like it was laughing too. My name is Nora Clay, and the day I bought that worthless pit, every man in that tent thought he had just watched a desperate woman throw her last dollar into a grave. For a while, I thought they were right. September came into Cedar Bluff without mercy. It did not arrive like weather. It squatted on the county and pressed its hot palm over every mouth, every creek bed, every blade of grass still trying to live. By noon, the dirt roads shimmered. By evening, the cattle stood in the shade with their heads low, too tired even to bawl. The wells coughed sand. The pastures had turned the color of old rope. The county auction was held at the fairgrounds under a white canvas tent stained brown along the seams from years of dust and cheap coffee. Men filled the folding chairs in sweat-darkened shirts and seed caps, smelling of diesel, leather, tobacco, and worry. I sat in the last row, with my hands folded over a checkbook that should have stayed in my pocket. My nails were split. My wrists ached from replacing a gate hinge before sunrise. There was dried mud on my jeans, though it had not rained in 7 months. That is the kind of place I was living in. Even the mud was old. I was not there to buy land. I was there because the bank had forced the county to sell off the Miller place. And watching another family lose dirt felt like attending a funeral you knew would eventually be your own. Up front, Dale Kruger, the auctioneer, barked numbers into a microphone with a bad cord. Every few seconds it popped and squealed, turning foreclosure into a circus sound. 42,000, now 45. I've got 42, looking for 45. A row ahead of me, Ellis Rusk raised 2 fingers without lifting his elbow. Ellis owned no real farm, but he owned pieces of nearly everyone else's failure. He bought distressed ground, cut it into 5-acre country retreats, and sold them to people from the city who wanted sunrise views but not manure smell. His boots were clean. His shirt was too white. His hands looked like they had never fixed anything under pressure. He turned just enough to look back at me. "Hard season, Nora," he said. "You holding up?" He smiled like he already knew the answer. I said nothing. The Miller place sold to him for less than the new irrigation rig had cost 15 years earlier. Old Ben Miller walked out before the gavel landed. His shoulders looked too narrow for his jacket. Nobody followed him. That should have been the end of it. People started standing. Chairs scraped the dirt. The tent emptied toward the punishing white glare outside. Then Dale cleared his throat. "One more parcel," he said. "Tax seizure. Old County Quarry off Pike Road. 39 acres. Some of you know it as the Bone Pit." That brought a ripple of laughter. Everyone knew the Bone Pit. It lay east of my back pasture, behind a sagging cattle fence and a rusted gate with no lock, because nobody had wanted inside for 40 years. A gravel company had blasted it open in the 70s, then abandoned it when the seam pinched out. What remained was a steep, jagged bowl of fractured limestone, rusted conveyor frames, poison ivy, and a pool of green water at the bottom that looked like it could dissolve a shovel. You could not graze it. You could not plant it. You could not even walk it safely. "County wants it off the books," Dale said. "Opening at 6,000. Nothing. The tent went quiet, except for the fan rattling near the podium. 4,000. Nothing. 2,000 then. Come on, folks. 39 acres. You can lose a truck down there and never see it again." Men laughed louder this time. Ellis turned around in his chair. "You ought to take it, Nora," he said. "Drop your skinny cows in. At least they won't wander." A few men chuckled. Not cruel enough to call themselves cruel, just enough to let me know they agreed. I looked at Ellis's clean hands, then at my own. My checking account held $1,375. That was the full weight of my future. Hay, diesel, a partial payment to the bank, maybe enough to make Mr. Brackett stop calling for 2 weeks. Dale sighed into the microphone. "Do I hear 1,000? No one moved. I do not know what rose in me then. I would like to say instinct. I would like to say vision. I would like to pretend I saw something nobody else saw. I did not. It was anger. It was 3 years of drought and debt and waking up at 4:30 to fight a losing war while men like Ellis waited to buy the body. It was the taste of dust in my teeth. It was the look he gave me, as if I was already a foreclosed thing. I lifted my hand. 1375, I said. The microphone whined. Every head turned. Dale squinted toward the back row. "Nora Clay?" "That's my bid." Ellis stared at me. His smile disappeared so fast it nearly made the money worth it. Then the tent exploded with laughter. 1,300 for a rock wound, someone said. Heat finally got her. Maybe she's starting a swimming hole. Dale looked almost embarrassed for me. "I have 1375, he said. "Any advance?" Silence. "Going once." My stomach dropped. "Going twice." I almost stood up and took it back. "Sold." The gavel hit the plywood podium. It sounded final in a way no storm ever had. At the clerk's table, I wrote the check with a hand that would not quite obey me. The ink dug into the paper. Shirley Bell, who had known my mother, looked at the amount, then looked up at me with eyes full of worry. "Nora," she whispered, "are you sure?" "Record the deed," I said. Outside, the sun hit me so hard I forgot how to breathe. I climbed into my old Ford, shut the door, and sat with the auction receipt in my lap. The cab smelled like hot vinyl, old oil, and the last of my sanity. I had just bought a hole, and I had paid for it with winter. The next morning, regret woke me before the rooster. It sat on my chest in the dark, heavy as a feed sack. I lay there listening to the house creak, knowing the truth would still be true when I opened my eyes. $1,375 gone. 22 cows depending on me. A mortgage payment due in 12 days. I made coffee strong enough to strip paint and drank it standing at the sink. Outside, the eastern sky turned gray, not pink. Even the dawn looked worn out. Chores came by muscle memory. Grain in the trough, check the pump, patch the loose board, count the cows, try not to count the ribs. They crowded the fence when I came in with the feed buckets. Their big, wet noses pushed through the rails, trusting me with the stupid faith of animals that do not understand bank notices. I could barely look at them. By 9, there was nothing left to avoid. I drove past the back pasture, through the dry wash, and down the old service track toward the bone pit. The gate leaned open. Its chain had rusted through years ago. I parked at the rim and stepped out. The pit was worse than memory. It fell away in a pale, broken bowl, 60 feet deep on the near side, and sharper along the east wall where the blasting had left flat faces of stone exposed to the sun. Old conveyor belts lay twisted near the bottom like dead snakes. A rusted crusher sat half swallowed by brush. Wind moved through the pit differently, low and hollow, carrying the smell of hot minerals and stagnant water. I walked down the cracked access road, sliding on loose gravel, grabbing at thorn bushes when my boots lost purchase. At the bottom, the air was colder. The green pool sat in a depression under the north wall, rimmed with scum. Mosquitoes hovered over it. Someone had dumped tires there years ago. Someone else had painted initials on a slab of stone, and the sun had peeled even the graffiti thin. I picked up a chunk of limestone. It was ugly, sharp, heavy, and useless. I turned it in my hand, then threw it as hard as I could into the green water. The splash echoed. "You absolute fool," I whispered. The pit threw my voice back at me. Fool, fool, fool. I sat on a flat stone for nearly an hour. Could I sell the rock? To who? Every hill in our county was rock under 3 inches of starving topsoil. Could I fence it and charge campers? One drunk teenager falling off the wall would take what little I had left. Could I fill it With what? Prayer? By the time I climbed out, my shirt was soaked through and my hands were bleeding from grabbing stone. I stood at the rim and looked back once. 39 acres. A wound I now owned. The town found out before supper. By the next morning, Cedar Bluff had decided the heat had broken me. At the grocery store, Mrs. Fenton stopped me between canned beans and powdered milk. "Heard you bought the bone pit," she said, soft and sharp at the same time. "My nephew says the liability alone could ruin a person." I put coffee in my basket, the cheapest kind. "Maybe I like rocks," I said. Her mouth tightened. "Pride is expensive, Nora." I paid with coins and walked out. At the feed store, the owner would not meet my eyes when he told me the price of oat hay had gone up again. At the gas station, 2 men stopped talking when I walked inside. At church, Ellis Rusk shook my hand with both of his and told me he admired my courage. He meant stupidity. 3 days later, Mr. Brackett from County First Bank called. I knew it was him before I picked up. Bank calls have a sound before the first ring ends. "Nora," he said, "we need to talk about your payment." "I know." "You're short." I said, "I know." "The grace period ends on the 18th. I can sell 4 calves at the auction." "They're underweight," he said. "You know that. Buyers are not paying for bones this year." I closed my eyes. Through the kitchen window, I could see dust moving across the yard in thin brown sheets. "I need time." "You spent time," he said, voice colder now. "According to county records, you also spent $1,375 on a condemned quarry." I said nothing. "Nora, I'm not your enemy, but the bank cannot carry a non-performing note forever. My father paid that bank for 31 years, and I am sorry for where things stand." Sorry was a soft word people used when they were holding a knife but did not want to look at the blade. "You have until the 18th, he said. "After that, I file." The line went dead. That evening, I sat on the porch steps while the light drained out of the fields. The cattle stood near the dry pond, confused by the memory of water. The barn roof sagged in the middle. My father's windmill turned once, squealed, and stopped. I was looking east, toward the pit, when I saw dust rise beyond the ridge. Not farm dust. Road dust. 2 white pickups came over the hill and stopped near Pike Road, just north of my boundary. Yellow lights flashed on their roofs. Men in orange vests climbed out, unloaded tripods, and began hammering stakes into the ground. I stood. The Pike Road connector. The county had talked about it for 12 years. A 4-lane bypass to pull freight traffic away from Main Street and tie into the interstate. It had been studied, delayed, redesigned, argued over, and forgotten so many times the whole town treated it like a ghost story. But those were surveyors, real ones, with tripods in my dying valley. A man drove a stake into the ground. The mallet strike carried across the dry air. One small wooden sound. I looked from the survey crew to the east, where the bone pit sat behind my pasture. For the first time since the auction, regret loosened its grip by one finger. I was at Pike Road before 7 the next morning. 3 trucks were parked on the shoulder. A woman in a hard hat stood beside one of them with rolled plans tucked under her arm and a radio clipped to her vest. She looked up when my tires crunched gravel. "Can I help you?" "I own land along the south fence," I said. "Nora Clay." Her posture changed. Not friendly exactly. Official. "Lena Ortiz, State Transportation Survey Lead." "Is the bypass real this time?" She gave a tired laugh. "Real enough to ruin my month. Federal money cleared. Contractor mobilizes in October." October. I felt that word land in my bones. "Where's the road going?" She unrolled part of the plan across her truck hood and weighed the corners with a tape measure and coffee mug. "Here," she said, tracing with a finger. "Runs through the low ground, cuts past your east line, then swings north before the old mill." "That low ground floods every spring." "We know." "It eats tractors in March." "We know that, too." I studied her face. "So how do you build a highway on it?" Lena tapped the drawing. "Excavate the muck, lay geotextile, bring in crushed structural aggregate, a lot of it, then build the base." I kept my face still. "How much is a lot?" She looked toward the valley and exhaled. "Hundreds of thousands of tons before pavement. Maybe more if the cores come back worse than expected." The world narrowed around the word aggregate. Stone. Broken, ugly, heavy stone. "Where does that come from?" I asked. "Commercial quarry up by Red Mesa, unless the contractor finds a closer certified source." She shook her head. "Red Mesa is nearly an hour each way with trucks. Not my budget problem, thank God." I thanked her and walked back to my Ford, slowly enough not to look like a woman whose blood had just turned to lightning. Inside the truck, I shut the door. Less than a mile from that staked route sat my 39 acres of exposed limestone. The worthless bone pit. The mistake. The joke. The next afternoon, a black pickup pulled into my yard. It was too clean to be local. A man stepped out wearing tan work pants that had never worked and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to the same exact height on both arms. He carried a leather folder and smiled with only the lower half of his face. "Nora Clay?" "Who's asking?" "Mason Greer, Regional Materials Manager for Hartwell Roadworks. We're handling the Pike Road connector." I wiped my hands on a rag. "Congratulations." His smile twitched. "We noticed you recently acquired the old quarry parcel along the corridor." "The bone pit." "Yes. Well, we may have a use for that property." I let the silence sit. Mason opened his folder. "We need a temporary staging area, equipment parking, pipe storage, Maybe a mobile office. Your pit has access, and it's close to the alignment. We'd pay a flat $10,000 for a 2-year lease. $10,000. My mouth went dry. 10,000 would bring the mortgage current. It would buy hay. It would stop the phone from ringing. It would let me breathe. For 2 seconds, the yes climbed up my throat like a living thing. Then I looked at his truck, the clean tires, the pressed shirt, the regional manager in my yard for a parking lot. You don't need a hole to park pipe, I said. Mason's smile stayed, but his eyes changed. It's convenient. No, I said. It's rock. He closed the folder a little. The material in that pit is untested, weathered, probably unsuitable. Then test it. I'm sorry? You bring a drill rig. You pull cores. If it fails, we talk about your lease. If it passes DOT spec, we talk royalties by the ton. The smile died completely. Ms. Clay, with respect, you bought a liability. With respect, you drove here because I bought your cheapest haul. He looked at me for a long time. I could feel my pulse in my gums. Finally, he said, I'll send a crew. Good. And if the rock fails, then you get your parking lot. He turned back toward his truck. At the door, he looked over his shoulder. Don't confuse luck with leverage. I almost laughed. Don't confuse poverty with blindness. The drill came the next morning on a flatbed. It crawled down the old access road into the pit like an insect made of steel. The rig set its feet against the stone, raised its mast, and screamed into the limestone for 6 hours. White dust shot into the air. The sound vibrated through my boots and into my teeth. Men in hard hats pulled out smooth gray cylinders from deep inside the east wall, marked them, packed them in wood crates, and drove away. The foreman told me lab results would take 3 days. 3 days. Mr. Brackett's deadline was 4. Those were the longest days of my life. I patched fences that did not need patching. I cleaned troughs twice. I sharpened tools. I walked the lane until my bad knees swelled. Every time the phone rang, I felt the floor drop. On the second evening, Ellis Rusk came down my driveway in a silver SUV. I was on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold. He stepped out slowly, hands in his pockets, looking around my yard like he was pricing its salvage value. Evening, Nora. Road's public, Ellis. Yard's not. He chuckled. Still got that sting. What do you want? I hear Hartwell had a drill in your pit. People hear too much. He climbed the porch steps without invitation. You're in a hard spot. Bank deadline's coming. I did not move. I'll buy the pit, he said. 25,000. Cashier's check tomorrow morning. My fingers tightened around the mug. 25,000. More money than I had seen in one place since my father sold a bull in 2009. Why? To take the headache off your hands. Ellis. All right, he smiled. To gamble. Maybe the road boys use it. Maybe they don't. I can afford to lose. You can't. That was when I knew. He had heard something. Maybe from a cousin at the lab. Maybe from a clerk at Hartwell. Maybe just from the same smell in the air that had brought Mason to my porch. Ellis did not buy headaches. He bought futures from people too tired to defend them. Get off my porch, I said. His face hardened. Don't be stupid. I was stupid last week. I'm improving. Tomorrow that report could say your rock is chalk. Then I'll own chalk. You'll lose the farm. Maybe. He leaned close enough that I could smell the mint on his breath. You are not built for this kind of negotiation. I stood. He was taller, richer, cleaner, and for one sharp second, none of that mattered. No, I said. I was built for worse. Ellis looked at me as if seeing, for the first time, that hunger had not made me smaller. It had made me dangerous. He left without another word. I sat back down after his taillights vanished. My hands shook so badly, coffee spilled over my wrist. The call came at 9:17 the next morning. Mason Greer did not sound smooth anymore. Ms. Clay, he said, can you come to the Hartwell field office? Tell me. I'd rather review the report in person. Is it good? A pause. I'll see you when you get here. I wore my work clothes, dusty jeans, brown boots, faded green shirt, the clothes I had nearly lost the farm in. The field office was a double-wide trailer set on blocks beside Pike Road. Inside, the air conditioning was brutal. It smelled like printer ink, plastic carpet, and fresh coffee no one had time to drink. Mason sat behind a desk covered in maps. He did not stand. He slid one page toward me. The lab report was a mess of numbers: specific gravity, absorption, abrasion loss, compression value. Only one line mattered. Classification: Grade A structural aggregate, meets or exceeds state highway base specifications. I read it twice, then a third time, because the first two felt like dreaming. The rock is usable, Mason said. I looked up. He corrected himself. The rock is excellent. I folded my hands in my lap so he would not see them tremble. What do you need? Exclusive extraction rights for the project. Minimum 220,000 tons. Maybe more depending on final base depth. What's your offer? He leaned back. We'll buy the entire parcel for $60,000. We assume liability, permitting, reclamation, everything. You walk away from a dangerous property with enough money to solve your immediate problems. $60,000. The number hit hard. It would clear the arrears. It would fix the tractor. It would buy feed. It might even pay down enough principal to keep Brackett smiling for a year. It was a miracle. It was also robbery wearing a pressed shirt. I thought about Red Mesa. 1 hour each way. Drivers, diesel, tires, delays, state penalties, trucks burning money in both directions. No. Mason's jaw moved. Ms. Clay, no sale. Be reasonable. I am. You are standing on a windfall no one expected, and you are about to overplay it. I want a royalty. He laughed once. Standard local royalty is 50 to 75 cents a ton. Then use a standard local quarry. His face went flat. I leaned forward. $3 a ton. I keep the land. You handle safety, dust control, water testing, haul road repair, and final grading. And I want $15,000 advanced today against royalties. That is absurd. So is hauling 200,000 tons from Red Mesa while your crews wait in the mud. He stood. We can source elsewhere. Then call them. The office went silent except for the air conditioner rattling in the wall. Mason stared at the map behind me. I watched him do the math. Not the polite math, the real math. The cost of trucks, the cost of time, the cost of telling the state the fast-track connector would miss its window because his materials manager got outplayed by a woman the town laughed at. $2, he said. $2.75. $2.25. $2.75 and the advance. That's not negotiation. No, I said, that's geography. His eyes snapped back to mine. There it was, the truth neither of us could move. The pit was ugly. The pit was dangerous. The pit was mine, and it was next door. Mason picked up a pen, clicked it, and pointed it at me. $250. 15,000 advance. We repair the haul road, maintain dust control, fence the perimeter, and return the site graded to inspector approval. You retain ownership. Final. I let 5 seconds pass because my father once told me, silence is the only free tool a poor person has left. Write it. At 3:42 that afternoon, I walked into County First Bank. Mr. Brackett's office door was half open. He looked up from his computer with the funeral face already prepared. Nora, he said, I was about to call. I placed the cashier's check on his desk. $15,000. It landed without drama. He picked it up, read it, blinked, read it again. This is from Hartwell Roadworks. It brings the mortgage current. His voice changed. I hated how quickly it changed. What is this connected to? Rock. Rock? The highway base, I said. Turns out my hole is useful. He stared at me. I watched the pity drain out of him and something worse fill its place. Interest. Well, he said, smoothing his tie, if there is continuing revenue, we can discuss restructuring. Maybe a capital improvement loan, new equipment, expansion. No. He blinked. Apply the check, I said. Remove the account from default, then leave my farm alone. He forced a smile. Of course. I walked out before he could offer me money I did not need from people who had nearly taken everything
when I did. That night, I slept for 11 hours in my clothes. The blasting started 2 weeks later. First came the dozers, then the crushers, then the dump trucks in a line so long they looked like black beetles crawling along Pike Road. Hartwell fenced the pit, widened the access road, and set a portable scale house near the gate. Every truck that rolled out carried my stone and printed my future on a weight ticket. The first blast shook the farm just after sunrise. A siren wailed 3 times from the east. The cows lifted their heads. Then the ground jumped. Not shook, jumped. A heavy thump rolled through the earth, up the porch posts, through my ribs. A second later, the sound arrived, deep enough to rattle the windows and send barn swallows bursting from the rafters. A cloud of white dust rose over the tree line. By noon, that dust had settled on everything: the porch, the truck, the troughs, the backs of my cattle, my own tongue. I saved the farm by inviting a machine to chew beside it. That was the part no one in town understood. They saw the checks. They did not see me rinsing lime dust from the water tanks twice a day. They did not see the cows bunching in fear every time the siren screamed. They did not hear the crusher grinding stone until it entered your dreams and made sleep feel like machinery. The money came fast. The first royalty check was $41,960. I opened it at the kitchen table beside a stack of overdue bills and stared until the numbers stopped looking like a mistake. I did not celebrate. I drove to the feed store. Mr. Hanley looked up from behind the counter. "Half-ton of economy mix?" he asked. "No," I said, laying the check down. 4 tons of alfalfa, mineral tubs, protein blocks, delivered today." He looked at the check, then at me. For the first time in years, he wrote my order before asking how I planned to pay. That is what money does. It turns doubt into service. By October, Cedar Bluff had rewritten the story. Mrs. Fenton caught me outside the post office and squeezed my arm like we were close. "Nora Clay," she said, bright as a church window, "we are all so proud of you, the way you saw value where nobody else did." I looked at her hand on my sleeve. "You told me pride was expensive." Her smile faltered. "Well, sometimes pride pays." "No," I said, "sometimes men underestimate desperate women." I left her standing by the flagpole. Ellis stopped speaking to me altogether, which improved the town considerably.
But he was not wrong about everything. The pit changed the farm. The pasture grass near the east fence wore a pale film. The new haul road cut across the corner like a scar. The cows fattened on good feed, but flinched at diesel brakes. The house stopped receiving bank letters, but started receiving dust through every window crack. I hired a young man named Eli to help with chores. He was quiet, broad-shouldered, and careful with animals. He did not ask about the checks. He just worked. One evening, after a blast rolled through the valley, I found him standing by the pasture fence, watching the dust cloud spread. "Worth it?" he asked. I wanted to say yes quickly, That seemed like the kind of answer a woman was supposed to give after winning. Instead, I looked at my cattle, then at the white haze hanging over the land my father had loved. "I don't know," I said, "but losing it would have been worse." The project lasted 112 days. Hartwell pulled more than 280,000 tons from the bone pit. Each truck carried away 22 tons at a time. Each ticket became part of a check. Each check paid down the farm, repaired the barn roof, replaced the dead pump, filled the hayloft, and bought a used tractor that started on the first turn of the key. By Thanksgiving, I owned the Clay farm free and clear. I should have felt light. Instead, when I walked to the east fence, the land felt heavier than before. On the last day, the crusher shut down at 4:06 p.m. I know because I was standing in the yard with a wrench in my hand when the grinding stopped. At first, I did not trust the silence. The farm had lived under that sound so long, my ears kept making it after it was gone. No crusher, no backup alarms, no hammering tailgates, no men shouting over engines. Just wind, just one crow on the silo roof, just my cows tearing hay in the trough. Eli came out of the barn. "They done?" "Sounds like it." For a full minute, neither of us moved. The silence felt strange, almost accusatory, as if it wanted to know what I had become while it was away. 3 days later, Mason Greer drove down my lane one last time. His truck was no longer clean. Fine white powder dulled the paint. He looked older than he had in September. He handed me a folder. "Final weights. Inspector sign-off. Road repairs scheduled next week. Site is released back to you." My hole again. He almost smiled. "Bigger hole now. Drive safe, Mason." He hesitated like he wanted to say something human, then thought better of it and left. I waited until his truck disappeared. Then I walked east, across the yard, through the pasture, past the fence they had repaired, to the rim of the bone pit. It was not the same place I had bought. The jagged bowl was gone. Hartwell had cut terraces into the earth, wide shelves stepping down into shadow. The east wall stood clean and pale, striped with layers of stone older than memory. The bottom was deeper now, open and raw, with clear water seeping through cracks where the green scum pool used to be. It was terrible. It was beautiful. It was a wound with edges sharp enough to tell the truth. I stood there as the late November sky pressed low and dark over the ridge. A cold drop hit my cheek, then another. For a second, I did not understand. Rain. Real rain. The first hard rain in 8 months came all at once, loud and violent, striking dust from the fence posts, the grass, the barn roof, my hair. It hissed when it hit the dry ground. It ran in gray streaks down the quarry walls. It gathered on the terraces and fell in thin silver sheets toward the bottom. I did not run. I stood at the rim until my shirt clung to my skin and my boots sank into softening dirt. Behind me, the cows lifted their heads and let the rain wash the pale dust from their backs. The farm was not saved cleanly. It was saved ugly. It was saved by spite, chance, stone, negotiation, and the kind of stubbornness people call foolish until it makes money. I looked down at the widening pool in the bottom of the pit. Clear water rose where everyone had seen only a dead hole. Then I turned toward the house. The mud held my boots with every step. Heavy, cold, perfect. And for the first time in years, the ground did not feel like it was trying to let me go.